So Linnea turned out to be one of the best supports in the game in general. What teams does she support the best? In this video, I'll just be explaining what does she provide on a team, what does she need on a team for her to shine properly, and then I'll be going through some of her team examples, starting from her obvious best teams to some niche teams that you can form with Linnea. Hopefully by the end, you'll know exactly where you should use your Linnea. Before we continue that though, if you're trying to get Linnea or any of her teammates, the best way to get your Genesis crystals is going to be throughout Topuplive. Topuplive offers top-ups for many games, including Genshin impacts, up to 30% cheaper than official stores. When you want to buy, you'd want to click my link in the description for the best deals. Click the offer you'd want to buy, then apply my code to get a discounted price. For Mihoyo games like Genshin, Honkai, and Zenless Zero, you'd want to use code CAM for 20% off of your purchase. And for other games on the website, you can use code Camilo for a 12% discount. And as you can see, for the $100 offer, the price went down to $80, saving you $20 on your purchase. But yeah, then you just need to fill in your user ID and region, click buy, pay, and the Genesis crystals will shortly be on your account. Topuplive also uses PCI security, which means it's 100% safe. Use the link in the description or the pinned comment to find those great deals with Topuplive. Alright, so Linnea is going to be an off-field sub DPS / support. Starting off with what does she offer on the team? The first thing she's going to offer is going to be great Geo off-field damage from her elemental skill. She just put Lumi at the ground and then they'll be just dealing damage. They can do that in different ways, in different forms, but essentially she just provides a lot of off-field Geo damage, which is super good. She can also provide healing from her elemental burst, which is pretty good. Her burst is just going to give you an initial heal and then also continuous healing, so Linnea can also be a good sustain slot in your teams, so you don't need to worry about that. She also enables and buffs lunar crystallized damage that happens from her first passive. Just whenever a party member triggers a hydro crystallized reaction, Linnea will convert it into lunar crystallized and then also buff it based on her defense, and that's going to be pretty good. And obviously she'll be able to open up a lot of lunar crystallized teams for any teams that can just provide hydro and geo to be applied on enemies consistently, and that's going to be pretty good. She can also give you geo resistance shred just by Lumi, her thing being on the field. It will decrease the enemy's resistance by 15% and an additional 50% if you have another not cry character in your team. So it's a total of 30% geo resistance shred, which is obviously valuable for her personally because she deals geo damage, and also valuable for any other characters on the team that also deals geo damage. So that's pretty good. And then finally, she can also provide elemental mastery buffs, which are also pretty decent. She can give those buffs to other characters if they're not cry characters, and if not, then she gets the elemental mastery buffs for herself, which she does benefit from a little bit, which is pretty good. So yeah, overall, this is what Linnea is going to offer you. She's a very well-rounded support and sub DPS character, especially considering she deals pretty decent amounts of damage on her own. Her support capabilities are definitely going to be pretty good. She's a character who's able to give you extra damage, heal you, resistance shred, elemental mastery buffs, and also enable lunar crystallize. She definitely has great value. Now, moving on to her team requirements, those are like sort of the pillars that you'll need in any Linnea team for it to like function properly. And those requirements just simply stem from her kit. The first requirement is, as I said before, you'll need another not cry character on the team. The reason for that is that 15% of her geo resistance shred is going to be the locks behind the moon sign thing. And to unlock that, you'll just need another not cry character. So without a second not cry character, you're basically losing half of the geo resistance shred you can get, which obviously affects her own damage and also affects your main DPS's damage properly. So that's going to be a very essential thing, and you definitely want to make sure you have a second not cry character on your team. Whether it's your main DPS, another support who's also not a cry, it doesn't matter, but you definitely want to have another not cry character to up your team's moon sign. The second thing you'll need is a hydro applier, preferably an off-field good hydro applier, but sometimes that's not really necessary. We're going to see later, but in general, you'll definitely need someone who can apply hydro in any sort of way, because lunar crystallize is going to require hydro. She does apply geo, but you'll need hydro also on the team, so you'd want any character who can apply hydro pretty fast. If not, the whole team's damage is going to tank, so obviously that's going to be a very important thing you'd want to make sure you have on your team. And finally, the last thing you're going to need is pretty obvious. You'll need another geo main DPS preferably, or other sub DPSs, to also help you apply more geo and also take advantage out of the whole geo resistance shred and stuff like that, because that's where most of her value is. Yes, she does buff herself, but her value shines more when you have other geos that can also take advantage out of that. So yeah, honestly, for team requirements, that's pretty much it really. You just want to make sure her moon sign is active, you'd want to make sure hydra is present, and then you want to make sure you have some characters that can take advantage out of her. That's pretty much it. Alright, now with that being explained, let's finally move on to some of her best team examples. Alright, so first of all, obviously her best team in general is just going to be a Zibai team. Zibai is the only Lunar Crystallized main DPS we have in the game right now. So obviously her being just a pure Lunar Crystallized main DPS, like an organic one, she's going to be the best character that can take advantage out of Linnea. And that advantage is going to turn her to literally the best main DPS we have in the game right now, in most cases at least. So that's definitely pretty good. If we're talking about a team with Zibai and Linnea, it's usually going to look like this. So you have Zibai and Linnea, and then you definitely want Columbina in general. Columbina is also going to be pretty essential for Zibai. I do think she's as important for her as Linnea, if not more by a little bit. So if you want to construct like the obvious best team for both Linnea and Zibai, Columbina needs to be there also. You can also have substitutes like Ino, for example, or something like that, but Columbina is definitely the best option. For the last slot, this is where you'll have great flexibility sort of. So I have options ranging from Aluga. You can also have Goru. Those are probably the best options you'd want to stick with. Between each of them, would I recommend using Aluga or Goru? I'll probably stick with whatever higher constellations you have. For example, if you have C6 Goru, then you probably should use them instead of like C0 or C2 Aluga. But if you have them both as C6 or both like C0 or just similar constellations, in general, I think Aluga is going to be a little better, but it's not a huge difference. So just go for whatever higher constellations you have, or just Aluga if you have them at the same level. You can have other options, for example, Shalonen, Zhongli, Fiorina, for example. Those are all going to be decent options. But honestly, with the introductions of Linnea, those are going to be way less valuable since she also heals. So even that sustained role they used to give you, where you can make an argument for them being used, is just completely gone right now. So I definitely recommend just sticking with Aluga or Goru. If not, you can use those other options like Shalonen, for example, Fiorina, Zhongli, whatever. All of them can give you something. So they're not going to be terrible, but they're definitely not going to be the best options. But yeah, in general, this is going to be the perfect team for Zibai, and this is going to be the perfect team in the game right now. At some levels of investment, at least, there are no other teams in this game that are going to be just better than this one. So yeah, Linnea is definitely a big upgrade for Zibai. She's probably going to be like a 25k DPS upgrade just by getting her. If you replace Goru with her, for example, or Aluga, she's just going to make that team like a whole tier better. So yeah, this is probably her best use case in general. But you can also definitely use Linnea in other team options. You can just use her basically with any Geo main DPSs. Since she also enables that Lunar Crystallize, just make sure you have another Hydra in your team, and then you can just make a Lunar Crystallize team for any other Geo main DPS. So for example, you have Ito. You can just use Ito, Linnea, and then obviously Columbina preferably. That's going to be your best Hydra option, and you probably want to make sure you have her. And then at the last slot, you can have Goru probably. That's probably the best option. But you can use other options too, like Aluga, for example, even Fiorina, just whatever. Obviously, you just want to make sure you have a second nut cry for Linnea. That's going to be pretty important. And then you just want to make sure you have the Hydro and all of the conditions we talked about before. And then you can just make a pretty good team. That's probably going to be the best team for most of these like normal OG Geo DPSs right now. Linnea is going to be able to deal great amounts of damage on her own with Columbina, and then also buff the Geo main DPS pretty significantly with the resistance shred and stuff like that, and then also give you a good healing slot on your team. So she's definitely going to uplift the whole Geo element in general, and that's going to be the case for, as you're seeing, Ito. Same thing with Noelle, for example. Same thing with Ningguang. Same thing with Navia. Obviously, how much better is going to depend a little bit, but for most of these characters, it's going to be at least slightly better than their current best teams. But especially for like Ito and Noelle and Ningguang, it's definitely going to be a decent upgrade. With Navia, it's probably a smaller upgrade, but it's still a small upgrade in general. And if you don't have like her best team already, then playing her with Linnea is definitely valid. Finally, another use case for her is just going to be like a general wheelchair comp. Same thing as like Lauma and Columbina, or Inefa and Columbina. You can just play her with Columbina, and she's going to be able to like enable that Lunar Crystallize reaction, and then you can basically use any main DPS. Preferably Hydro main DPSs are going to be the best for the reactions not to be like too complicated, but basically it's going to be valid with a lot of characters. For example, you can have a Neviette team, so you can have Neviette, Linnea, Columbina, and then as the last character, you can have Fiorina, for example, Aluga, or just whatever. That's definitely going to be a pretty decent team for Neviette. I'm not sure I was going to compare it to like other wheelchair comps for him. Haven't really seen or done any calcs, but it's probably going to be around the same, maybe a little better, a little worse, but definitely around like the same tier, and it's definitely going to be a valuable, valid comp. Also, if you have her C2, she's going to be able to buff Hydro main DPSs too, and sub DPSs. She's going to be able to give them crit damage, so she will be more than like an enabler, and she can turn into like an actual support for them. So that team is going to work much better than C2. I think it might even be valid without Columbina, so you can use something like Navia, Linnea, Luga, and then Fiona, for example. In that case, Linnea is going to be enabling the Lunar Crystallize and dealing her own damage, which is going to be pretty good, but she's also going to be able to directly buff Navia and give them some extra crit damage with her C2. That's going to be valid, but preferably you should still play her with Columbina. That's probably going to give you like the best damage overall. But yeah, there's just many other wheelchair comps that you can do with her. In general though, those are going to be her main use cases. Her best one is obviously Zibai. Honestly, I think this is like her main value. If you're not pulling her for Zibai, I don't think you should pull her in general, except if you really like an older main DPS like Ito, for example, or Ningguang or whatever, then you might pull her to like upgrade them a little bit. But in general, her value with Zibai is going to be her main like point of shining. But yeah, that was it with you guys. Tell me what teams you're going to be using with Linnea. I'm pretty sure someone is going to be using her as like a main DPS or something. If you guys leave a like, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Peace.